So, yeah. Astu. So let us continue. So let's start. In fact, let's start with the Om. And one thing I would like you to try, okay, because this was something that came up in the other class. What I'm also going to do is that I had started a pilot group of Sanskrit yoga. I'll share in the group the links to that, the lectures that are given there. They're slightly different. They're not like identical. And I'll include them with these videos also so that there is a cross fertilization of the ideas that get told there and here. They're not identical because of circumstances. So there was an interesting understanding that came with the sound Om. What I would like you to do is see at the end of the day, the sound we are producing is coming out through the space of our being. Normally that space of our being is constricted. It's limited to who we think we are, right? So the moment we are able to, even through our imagination, open up that space, the quality of sound changes. So with the ah, like when we had done, imagine you're on top of the mountain or something like that, then the sound ah opens up. But what we've opened up is a window of a dimension psychologically, but of our existential space. So this was a kind of insight or an experience that came about last time is when you're doing the Om, because we'll start with the Om. What I'd like you to do is to visualize the universe, to feel the universe, not to just think of the universe, to feel the universe inside your head. So to feel the the macrocosm in your microcosm. So just feel that and then do the sound Om and see what happens to it. Astu. So we'll do this Om 3 times, Om Shri Guru Bhyo Nama, and then continue. Shri Guru Bhyo Namaha Harihi Om. Atha. Astu. So what I'll do immediately is to just take us through the grammatical structures of the Sanskrit language, which I had very briefly gone over. So maybe just spend a few minutes on this to revise it for us more than anything else. So here we had looked at the fact that when we are using language, the right brain is creating an image. So the smallest construct of a language, the smallest structure of a language is a subject and a verb. So the subject in this case is like the boy and the verb is goes. I've just taken a very simple one. And the image is of a boy who's going. Now when we ask the different questions, first of all, you can ask who goes, directly connected to the verb. Boy goes. Question answer, picture clear. Then along with goes, you can ask many other questions which are like goes with whom, where, how, why, from where, when. Each of these questions, the answer to them is adding a detail to the picture in the right hemisphere, to the right brain. So it's adding a picture there. I mean, it's adding a detail to that picture. So the more precisely you can establish the relationship, interrelationship of words, the less ambiguity there is in the structure that is being formed in the left side, on the right side as well. So there is a one consonance between the clarity of the usage of language and the formation of the image. So if the sentence that we have here is the boy goes to school from cycle in the morning at 8 with friend. Let's move on to the next one. Sorry. So here we have the boy goes to school from home by cycle with friend to study in the morning at 8. And like I mentioned that in the English language, if I just told you the word school, in this idea, in this image of mine, you would not, there would be a lot of ambiguity as to the position of that school in my thought. So is it going to school or from school or off school? We don't know. So in order to give it that clarity of position, to establish its relationship precisely with the other components of my thought, I am adding the preposition. But when I'm adding the preposition, then you're forced to hold these two together. Otherwise, it will again become confusing. So we see that by the addition of prepositions and all, you have 18 words. When you collapse the preposition into the word, which is the vibhakti or the declension or the case forms of the Sanskrit language, then the words first and foremost become codes. And what are the codes of? They are the codes of the interrelationship of the different thought components. So if you're using Sanskrit as a lens to view the world, you and to express it through the Sanskrit language, you would be forced to see relationships. You will not just see a school independently like that. You will have to see the school in relationship with the rest. And therefore, there is a certain spontaneous formations of the relationship of things that comes about when you are using the vibhakti forms. And like we saw that you had the 7 vibhaktis and the 8th, which is vocative. And what was the basis of that? There are things, then there is an object subject relationship, then there is a doing something with the object. So the first one is the nominative case of the Prathama Vibhakti, the subject. Then the object, where you subject. Then the object is when you're doing something, you're looking at that, or you're talking to that, or something in that case. So that's the accusative, the second Vibhakti. Then you have the with, the instrumental case, the Tritiya Vibhakti, where you're doing, there's an exchange. Now what you, in the exchange, there are two ways of exchanging. Either you're giving to or you're receiving from. So the fourth one is the dative, you're giving to, Chaturthi Vibhakti. And the fifth one is you're getting from, the ablative, okay, from. And then you have the relationship of whatever you're giving or getting has to belong to that individual or to something. There is some relationship there. So that's why you have the Shashti Vibhakti there, or the genitive. And then you have whatever you're giving has to be placed, has to be located somewhere, in, on, and or a relationship sometimes. So of these things, or among these things, in these things, this one stands out. So even that is giving a relationship of a part with the whole. So there, that is the locative or the Saptami Vibhakti there. Okay, and the final is a Sambodhanam, where you're calling out. Hey, you're just recognizing the presence. You need not necessarily engage in anything more than that. Okay, those are the 8 Vibhakti forms, and like I do it with the actions, it's quite helpful. So you have Balakaha, so Boyaha. This is my Sanskritization of English, where you make English more precise. So Boyaha gosti, schoolam, homat, cyclaya, friendena, studiyaya, morning a, 8a. And you see that because the preposition has collapsed, it's half the number of words. And very interestingly, today, in fact, I've requested Mahabaleshwara Bhatt of the Gurukulam to come and share about the Gurukulam at the end of the class. So when he was there in the Sanskrit World Conference in Vancouver in 2018, it was remarkable for me to notice that when he did his presentation, in 10 minutes, the content he said was 3 times more of the content that would have if he had to speak the same thing in English. Why? Because of the brevity of the language. So it allows a lot of clarity. It allows a lot the possibility of expressing more in less, in a sense. So balakaha gacchati vidyalayam grihat dvichakrikaya mitrena. Both of these are instrumental, as you might have known. They're the Tritiya Vibhakti, but aya is the feminine, because dvichakrika is a feminine word, and mitrena is a neuter word, which is like the masculine as well. Pathanaya, for study, pratah kale, at in the morning, ashtavadane, at 8 o'clock. Then we had Taradi, who did this very beautiful drawing for us. And so this is just with the Devanagari script. And just before this class, I had my regular class at IIT. And I was telling them about the value of the script, and I'd like to just leave you with the thoughts about the importance of this script, because one is that there is a one-to-one relationship between the letter and the sound. So what does that do to? So I asked them this question. I said, if somebody gave you a word in Sanskrit, a word that you have never encountered, but you know the Devanagari script and you are clear about the relationship of the sound that is associated with every letter. So somebody gives you a word, a completely new word in the Sanskrit language, and somebody gives you an English word, completely new word with a lot of vowels and whatever. What would be your reaction to each of them? So I'd like you quickly to just give it a thought and tell me. So what would be your reaction to these two?
We can read Sanskrita word any day, even if we don't know, but English we don't know how to read.
Yes.
And then everybody reads it as it is, like there is no change. And now if we take English, I pronounce in some way, some other country, they pronounce it in their way. So there is not a common pronunciation for English as such. But Sanskrita is like universal. No one can
Wonderful. So what does that do psychologically to us? So if you're encountering a new word, what would it do psychologically to us if you had to try to pronounce it? Versus a word that you don't know, it's a new word, but you're confident about the components of the word.
Yeah.
What would it affect us psychologically?
I feel comfortable reading it or taking effort to read it.
And what would it necessitate? Now, supposing I have an English word that is completely new, and what would I need to do in order to read it correctly?
I need to know the meaning, how it.
No, not even for the meaning, just to pronounce it. What step would you take to know how do I pronounce it?
Alphabets. We need to know the sound and the alphabets.
Not in Sanskrit. In Sanskrit, it will not work. In English, it will not work. If you know the alphabet,
phonetics. Few things are through phonetics.
No,
in
no.
English there could be silent characters. So
there are rules also. If it is before this, after this, kind of.
No, no. In fact, yesterday I heard a word called accoutrement. You will be able to say it. It's a French word. Accoutrement. That is, it's spelled
Accoutrement.
Accoutrement. Yeah, accoutrement. Now it's a French word, but it's used in English, and somebody used it in English, and of course I kept saying ment, accoutrement, but it's not. It's accoutrement because it is a French word. Yeah. So we even those rules may not hold good if you're actually using a word in English which is allowed, but it's from another language.
Yes, exactly. So basically, you see that it is not in these languages. It is not sufficient to just know the phonetics of the letters, and therefore you are to be constantly dependent on somebody to tell us. There is an independence versus a dependent dynamics that plays out. What does that do? So as a people, if you're trying to learn a language, you always, what does it do to your levels of confidence? So very interesting, this point is that there was an Australian friend who was suffering from dyslexia. And dyslexia is a chronic inability to, it's a chronic, what do you say, lack of confidence when faced with the language to read the spelling of a, to read out a word in the language. And he found that when he studied Sanskrit, his dyslexia and English improved. Because the reading of the Sanskrit seemed to affect his self-confidence to the extent that he was ready to take on this and not be troubled by the fact that there was no logic in the way it was written. So again, interesting things, many implications. Then we were looking at the script. So imagine the Chinese. The Chinese don't even have sounds to word. They have a full image. So if you always are only limited to images being taught to you, what would that do with respect to that representation of that language? Authority, many things come in. So if you don't have the freedom to suddenly create a new word. That word has to come down. Versus every sound, if it gives you the freedom of combining it the way you want, so long as it's following a certain logical framework. But more or less, if you have these words up together and you create a word, it does something to the mind. It does something to the confidence. So these are certain aspects of the subconscious impact of language on our being, and we take it all for granted. we take it all for granted about how we are being formatted by the languages we use and the scope that different languages offer us to create certain psychological structures within ourselves. Astu, it's quite, I mean, I'll let you think about it. So ponder about it. Then what does a capital letter do versus non-existent of the notion of capital letters? What does that do to our psychology? Huh? So think about those things. And also the fact that Sanskrit doesn't have a script of its own. It can be written in any language, so long as there is a sound correspondence to the letters, to the sounds of the language. Sound to letter correspondence. So what does that imply again? So I will next move on to the revision of the lessons themselves, so that sorry, 1 second, I've lost that. It just got shut. Okay, so here the initial lectures we've seen, there's not much of grammar happening in them. So I'll just quickly run through it in any case. Okay, so we just, in the basic course, we were looking at what language is doing, appreciating the sound, grammatical structures, etc. And that's what we've looked at, the tongue as an instrument of creation of language, of speech. But in Sanskrit, the tongue, we don't have jihva. It'll be interesting to explore if there is a word for language which has the tongue connotation in it. But it really is that speech is essentially a reflection, a shining of ourselves. What is its purpose? We look at all of that. And, you know, the role of language in our lives. So it's a repository and therefore it's valuable. It helps. These are the challenges. What is Sanskritam? It is perfectly done and well done. And why? Because it is every single utterance of this language, written form of the language requires us to think. The last time we were talking about it, if there is a n sound, it will have to be determined by the following letter. So this constant awareness, not just of letters independently, but what is coming before, what is coming after, this constant need to position what is being represented so that it is accurate, it is precise. And just, is it a dead language? And no, it is a recorded language. There are many villages that speak it, etc. Whatever spoken, yes, it was. And should we invest in learning it? Of course. I don't have to convince you about that. So these are just the quotations. That's not what we want. So the second one was about the letters. Tell me.
You're not sharing, ma'am.
You can't see what I'm showing?
No.
No.
Achha, I will make sure you can. 1 second. Okay. Can you now? Is it better? Achha.
Yes,
So the
now we
second
can
one
see.
was, yeah,
Yes.
the second one was about the sound structures. This we've looked at in great detail. And then you have the benefits of it at all levels. And this was an interesting point. So if you have a word dharma, which becomes dhamma, it might mean the same thing, but what is the emphasis of dharma versus the emphasis of dhamma? When people chose to say dhamma instead of dharma, what changes happened to that led to this change, political change? Anybody?
They were not able to pronounce R.
They were not able to pronounce R, could be one part of it. And does it affect the output? What becomes the focus? If dharma can be represented as dhamma, what becomes the focus of the dhamma?
Ma.
Dha and ma.
Satyam. And also the fact that communication becomes important. the focus shifts onto it becoming communication centric rather than truth centric. When you're saying dharma, it's not just the pronunciation of dharma, but the fact that the sound dharma has certain intrinsic properties in terms of the sound quality, the physiological touch aspect of it, the cosmic ring of it. So there are many things that are aligned when you're pronouncing dharma, because that is how it was received. There is no mental interference. But when dharma becomes dhamma, with the shift of dharma to dhamma, one of the main things that happens is the admission that language's primary goal is only communication. But in the process of communication, there might be certain losses that are happening. But because as a society, we are shifting from a more intuitive, a more holistic point of view to a more utilitarian mind, we are no longer focusing on the perfection of the sound itself. And what happens? So if you have like the secret chambers where you have to give a voice password. So if the word you use is not identical, you will not be able to open the door. So if you imagine the universe as a web of these multiple vibratory patterns, when you say dharma versus dhamma, there are certain doors that will not open in the same way that they would if the dharma is being articulated. When I'm saying that, this is not to say, again, please don't get me wrong, that this is never to talk about supremacy. Supremacy is not a discourse here. This is just about saying that the requirement of precision corresponds to a certain development of a faculty of the mind. So again, I was telling my IIT kids today, I said that if you're studying Sanskrit at IIT, it is not because you will learn another language and anyway you're going to do big things with, Sanskrit probably. Maybe someday, but not immediately. Doesn't have a direct utilitarian value. But if you focus on getting these aspects of the language, you will build faculties that will be helpful in anything you do in life. Because the mind is trained to be present. The mind is trained to pay attention to detail. And that is the quality that is of universal value. And that is when I talk about the yogic aspects of Sanskrit. So moving on to the formation, this is what we looked at. So you're building a code, the philosophical language is what I shared with you. So some psycholinguistic implications are that the awareness of the relationality or the interrelationships of thought components, unambiguous categorizing of the world around and within. It promotes non-linear thinking, because one of the things that Vibhakti forms allow is the rearrangement of letters, of words. So you can say Balakaha Vidyalayam Gacchati Pratah Kale or Pratah Kale Vidyalayam Balakaha Gacchati. The order doesn't matter. And that is what allows the formation of these fantastic creations of verses. What does that do? Because I've been trying to look at the impact, the psycholinguistic impact of this language. And there when you're reading a shloka, your mind has to hold, acha, this is finished there and that is, you have a second vibhakti here and a second vibhakti here. Acha, these two go together. So it trains the mind to hold certain pieces of information together. There is no linearity of, iske baad ye aayega, uske baad wo aayega, uske baad wo aayega, uske baad wo aayega. I was joking and telling my German friends, the Germans are very, very disciplined people. And what I learnt of the language, and Sheila ji can tell me if she's there, that very often the main verb comes at the end of the sentence. So if you're a German child, and naturally in communication, the verb is the most important part, almost. So imagine you have to sit there, you have to listen to the entire sentence to know what the person actually wants you to do. It cultivates certain qualities in that individual of a certain discipline of listening, of following, it's a subconscious thing. Whereas in the Indian mind, you can tell it like that, aise bhi bolo to sach hai, waise bhi bolo to sach hai. So all our rules are, they're all symbolic there. Everything is open for interpretation. It creates a different mind. So the Indian mind and rules are not always aligned. But then we have redundancy of the self-referential I. So you don't have to say aham gachami, just gachami is sufficient. And the implications of the use of the passive voice. That's something that we will look at down the line. So these are quite powerful statements where it says that Sanskrit is not just a language that will make that is a dead language, but it has the potential of making the dead people alive. Now, what that means is again something that we can talk about. So these were just some basic things. Tell me if I'm going too fast or something, and I can slow down. All right. I am just trying. So in the basic Sanskrit, what I have done for all those of you who have gone through it at different degrees is just to make you aware of the different contexts in which the vibhaktis are being used. But for the software application of the language, you are not bound to remember all those rules. For the software application, it suffices to remember that the general cases. So if you remember that the Prathama Vibhakti corresponds to the subject, that is enough. If the second one, you remember that if you're using the second, it can either be the destination. So aham vidyalayam, if vidyalayah asti, that's the subject. Aham vidyalayam gachami. So that becomes the destination. Or aham balakam pashyami. So I asked you to do this physical gesture as well, so that in the brain you are seeing, acha, ho raha hai, and that reinforces it structurally in the neural pathways as well. So when you're learning this language, please do this like the children do, so say it aloud, do these actions, play with them, have fun with Sanskrit basically. And this is the language where you can have fun of your lifetime for a few lifetimes. That's the extent of joyfulness and playfulness and creativity that is embedded in the very nature of this language. Okay. So that's why. So the Tritiya, the third vibhakti, is the instrument, with, by, and that is enough. And so you can sometimes, so some of the rules are saying that you can do something with somebody. The word for with is saha. So if you see saha, by default, you will have to put the Tritiya or the instrumental case. The other one is vina, without that instrument in a sense. So one of the cases for the vina is also the Tritiya. So with and without, both of them go. And there are a few other rules, but it suffices to know this much to be able to apply it. The rest is what you will encounter in literature. And when you encounter it in literature, because you have the framework, you will be able to say that, acha, somewhere I read that rule and I'm seeing it's applied like that, so aisa bhi hota hai. But that is the value of it. Until and unless you're beginning to write your own compositions and all of that, at the level that we are, it is quite sufficient to know how to access content. Then the deeper one goes into it, then one becomes a producer of new content. So to learn how to introduce oneself, some basic pronouns. So here, like I was telling you, so this bhavataha and bhavatya is something which is often quite confusing. So you have bhavataha, and the Indian equivalent of that is, or the Hindi equivalent is aapka. But in Hindi, when you say aapka, then you don't know the gender of the person. But it is connected to the gender of the object. So, aapka ghar and aapki bhasha, for example. So, this again is this opens up possibilities for exploration. That what does connecting certain words to the gender of the subject versus the gender of the object? How does it play out? What is it doing? No. So bhavataha means aapka, so the masculine is there, and bhavatyaha. So bhavatyaha is the feminine, aapka, but the lady. And tava is the informal thing. So where there is, so it's tumhara naam, it's literally that. So in Sanskrit, we don't have the third form, which is the absolute casual word, tera naam. We don't have that. So it's aapka and tumhara, these are the two. So bhavan, bhavati, which is the equivalent of the Spanish usted. So it works like the third person as well in terms of its conjugation. And you have the twam, which is like the you, English you, the informal second person. And very fascinating. So once I was on a plane and there was this gentleman beside me traveling abroad to some European country, and there was this person beside me, and we were talking in English. Okay, and in English, we were saying like, you know, you come, you go there, and you and all. So it was with you. Where do you live and all? Then we realized that both of us know French. So, and I was moving into a French-speaking world. I said, let me practice, brush up my French a little bit. So I was trying to jhado whatever little bit of French I had. But then you realize that in French, you have to distinguish between whether it is informal or formal. And suddenly, the need to go from you, which didn't really matter, to a formal and informal, it created a very interesting dynamics between the two of us. So again, this thing of the use of language and how it is shaping relationships, literally. Things like that. So tava is there, and now the equivalent of each of this is a bhavataha, aapka. The masculine is bhavan. And how does bhavan form? The van is a suffix vat. Vat means possessor of, when it is used in suffix context with the noun. So vat means the possessor of. So bhavan in the masculine implies one who possesses bha. Bha comes from the root bhu, which means existence, like bhavati. So one who possesses existence is bhavan, masculine. One who possesses existence, feminine, a lady, presence, is a bhavati. And man and mati do the same thing. Buddhiman, buddhimati. Okay, so just remember that again. There's no stress about it. And twam. Twam is when it's a subject. So twam kim karoshi. What are you doing? Tava griham. So that's why these actions are helpful. So twam kim karoshi, you can directly like either this or that or whatever. So twam kim karoshi, it's directly addressing the person as a subject, and tava, so your. So these actions will be quite helpful. Okay, so there was a problem. All right.
Can I ask
So
a question?
just showing. Yes, please ask me.
Yeah, so in this case, you told us that the gender, when you know the gender, you can ask the question as bhavatya or bhavan, okay? But when you don't know the gender, let's say in English, you have a common name called Chris. It can be either a male or a female, you don't know. And if you are, let's say, you're asking a question, how would you say that? You don't know the gender of the person.
Tava nama kim?
Tava namake. No, but they want to say respectfully. If you want to say respectfully, then what would you say? So I think respectfully, you would probably, there is a bhavat, there is in the neuter. So the neuter forms, they become like the masculine forms, except for the first and second cases where it's bhavat, bhavat. So then it would be bhavataha only. So bhavataha would be the neutral. And like in many languages, when you don't know, or if you have many and only one of the masculine, it would tend to shift to the masculine. So if you have, so the safer question would always be the masculine one.
Okay, thanks.
So that would be a thing there.
I have a question too.
Please.
May I ask?
Please.
Yeah. You spoke about tvam and the bhavan, bhavati, pronoun. I have a question, is that somewhere I had somebody tell me this, that tvam is a very intimate form of calling out, which would mean that you would use it for gods or to your mother, because if you see tvameva mata, tvameva, so basically the gods, whenever you say dehi, you refer in the madhyama purusha form only. And somebody even said that even to mother, someone with whom you have an extremely intimate relationship, that's the only place where you are using the madhyama purusha. This is what someone had told me. So I just want to know what's your opinion about it.
So, I mean, there is this whole thing of the informality of it. No? The tvam has an informal nature. And to what extent it is informal, I think there's a lot of subjectivity in the interpretation of that tvam. In fact, I grew up always using the tvam. Even with elders, all we would use the tvam. And it is only recently that with the Sanskrit Bharati tends to do more of the bhavan and bhavati. Because why do they introduce the bhavan and bhavati? Because verb conjugation is simpler. I can get away with the equivalent of this. So if I'm teaching somebody a language and I just teach them the third person and the first person, and there is an equivalent of the second person as the third person. So bhavan bhavati gets translated, that's conjugated as the third person. Then I don't even need to teach you the karoshi. So I've eliminated a whole section of memorization. So it simplifies the extent of learning, initial learning. So that's where the bhavan bhavati. But otherwise, with the tvam, again, I would personally not make it a big thing. So I think it's a very subjective matter, and where one is comfortable to use tvam. It's like in French, you would, if you are getting familiar with somebody, you would say, no, now you can. So in French, you really have to ask permission. Can we now be on the tum terms? So est-ce qu'on peut se tutoyer? Means can we now say tu, you informally? Otherwise, you have to start with an up. So the etiquettes of a language. Sundar?
Shall I make a comment? Yakaraju here. In South,
Yes.
we use tvam and tava very frequently. In fact, only after I came to Mumbai, I got to know this bhavan and bhavati. It's always tvam and tava, in South. I think this is my observation. I may be right or wrong, but these are used very frequently in South as tava only and tvam only, like informal ways, even for respect. This is just an observation. You may kindly clarify.
Yeah, again, I think it's a cultural thing, this one. Yeah, I think it's a cultural thing. So
I think all languages have this, isn't it? I mean, in Bangla also, if you're formally, you'll say apni, and then you will proceed to tumi, and then if you're really familiar, you'll go to tui. So,
but like in Bengali, we don't have a special permission. Like we don't say that, now can I tell you to me?
yeah,
It just a natural slipping into it. In French, you almost have to, there is a tutoyer. There is a word for saying, to take permission to go from you formal to you informal.
so that is very cultural, right?
Yes. So it's a very cultural thing.
Yes.
Now, can you just share the 5th slide, please?
I have another question.
Yeah.
The question is, in French, do you have informal at all?
Yeah. You have the informal tu. Yeah. That's
Okay.
basic for all. Go down.
Okay.
So here again we had the asti, nasti. So with the verb conjugation, and we've looked at this a little bit, where we had these the ti. So the third person will tend to get the ti. So again, maybe what is important, what I can do in the interest of things. Okay, so Sundar, go down. Go down. All right. Go down. Yeah. So the codification of words, like we said here, the fact that you've said pibati doesn't require you really to say he or she. Pibati is sufficient in itself. In conveying the meaning. Like we discussed the other day, if I say go, then you're not sure whether you go, I go, we go. You have to put the subject. So again, brevity is spontaneously achieved when the word is sufficient in itself. Okay. Will you go to the next one? And what you would have done, so when you are looking at the Sanskrit grammar, one of the things, so in the nouns, we have looked at the nouns, and you know that the nouns have the grid of the the 7 vibhaktis and the ekavachanam, the singular, the dvivachanam, the dual, and the bahuvachanam, the plural. Now, when they teach it traditionally, they will go singular, dual, plural, singular, dual, plural. They will do that. But if you then have to remember if you have to use the 7th case of the bahuvachanam, the mental requirement would be to go down the 21 before you arrive at that. Whereas in my school, how they taught it was to do it vertically. You just learn the forms vertically. The big advantage of that is you start seeing certain patterns more noticeably. And that if I need to go to the seventh case of the plural, I just have to go down the seventh of the plural. So it will be the seventh number because you tend to learn it by rote in that order. So when you're memorizing the Sanskrit forms with the verbs, with the nouns, please learn it vertically. And if you learn it with the actions, it really helps.
Can you just show us an example of what you're saying, what you mean when you say vertically? I know you're referring to Nara, Naro, Naraha, Naram, Naro, Nara.
Yeah. Sundar,
But can you just show us that? Yeah.
Sure. Sundar, can you just take me to the 20th lecture, please?
In the meantime, I have a feedback. This learning vertical, it proved very well. It was very useful to me. I tried this experiment and I enjoyed it.
Okay. We've got Mahamala who's already joined us, so I'll take another minute. Sundar, can you go down to the tables? Yeah, so if you take this, can you just enlarge it, please? So if you can see this one, if you can look at the Janaka part of it, okay, the first one to our left, if that's the screen you're seeing. So it's the word Janaka, father. So you have this grid. Sanskrit, like I said, is about grids. So one grid is like this, where you have 21 main ones, and then the 3. So you've got 24, 8 into 3. So you've got this 8, the 8 declensions, the vibhakti forms, and then you have the 3 vachanas or the numbers. So if you are learning it vertically, if you're learning it horizontally, then you have to learn Janaka, Janako, Janakaha, Janakam, Janako, Janakan, like that. So if I have to remember what is the 7th of this plural, I have to go in my mind through the whole list of it till I come to the end. Whereas if I'm learning it vertically, I need to remember only these forms. And by the time I'm at the end, I know it. If you learn it vertically, one other huge advantage is that the second case becomes extremely easy because the first 2 are the same, the next 3 are the same, the next 2 are the same. So practically you have to remember 3 forms. Similarly, if you're learning the Bahuvachanam, the 4th and 5th are the same. You just have to remember that 4th, 5th, same, that's it. So you're reducing the amount of memorization just by changing the way in which you are doing the rote exercise for it. Sundar, can you go down? Can you show me a verb? I will end on that note of the verb. Mahabala, aham samapayami. Ekam nimisham anantaram samapayami. So these are all the different forms. Can you go down a little more?
Okay. Yeah.
So this is the other one. So this is the other important thing. So Sanskrit basically makes your mind like a grid-like thing. And this grid-like making of the mind is what enables the computation. So if I'm telling you with a vibhakti, supposing I tell you what is the third person dual case, you have to immediately calculate. There's a lot of computation that happens. And that is what also makes the brain like that. It allows you to have this computer. Similarly, for the verbs, you have this grid. What is the grid? The grid is ekavachanam, vivachanam, bahuvachanam is standard. And then you have first person, second person, third person. So again, there is this computing that takes place with the verbs. So in your mind, when you're learning Sanskrit, you have to just remember this grid and you learn it for one. The application will be on many. So the amount of vocabulary you need to master is not that much in terms of knowing the grammatical structures. Considering the volume of the literature and words, the extent of investment to master it all is minimum. And I think if you just remember these grid things and know how much to remember, what not to remember, and like I keep emphasizing, remember one that you can then apply on many. Remember any one form of one word. And if you know the masculine akara, you know the Napunsaka Linga by default almost. If you know the akara words, you know the ikara words by default almost, if you just know the how it modifies. So practically 4 kind of word forms you've reduced to 2. So apply just to one application and form that neural pathway in a very fixed manner. Astu. So I will stop here. Sundareshan.
Yeah.
Thank you. Mahabala. So I was, last time I had requested Siddhant to come and share with us about the work that he's doing and avenues that where I support, and if those of you who would like to contribute financially, I mean, you would like to, repay what you are receiving, because there will be some kind of a repayment or the other. Nothing happens for free for anybody, all of us. I mean, the fact that you've chosen to be here has its own implications and all. So if you would like, for those of you who feel like doing that, there are these different avenues, and I've requested Mahabala to share a little bit on the work that the Gurukulam that he's doing at the Gurukulams. So Mahabala.
Namaste.
Namaste.
Guru.
So Mahabala, you all know Vinaya. Many of you know Vinaya Chandra. So Mahabala is a classmate of Vinaya Chandra's, and now he's leading the Gurukulam. So young shoulders with a lot of responsibilities, very effectively run. Mahabala, vadati va?
श्रूयते
विदेशीयाः अपि सन्ति, हिंदी न चलति, इंग्लिश प्रयत्नं करोतु.
न.
Okay, so Bhavan vadatu, I will translate. Okay, so Bhavan Hindi madhye vadatu, I will translate for the rest of you then. Okay.
कः नमांसि. इदानीं यथा भगिन्या अनुराधया परिचयः कृतः, कर्नाटक में 3 गुरुकुल है. वेद विज्ञान गुरुकुलम, मैत्रेयी गुरुकुलम और प्रबोधिनी गुरुकुलम.
So there are 3 Gurukulams in, I'll translate for those of you who are from overseas. There are these 3 Gurukulams in Karnataka itself. There is the Veda Vijnana Gurukulam, there is the girls Gurukulam known as Maitreyi Gurukulam, and the younger boys known as Prabodhini Gurukulam.
हम बहुत बार कहते हैं जो अभी हमारा गुरुकुल आधुनिक शिक्षण प्रक्रिया है, उनमें परिपूर्णता नहीं है, ऐसा हम सोचते हैं कभी कभी. अर्थात जो पाश्चात्य प्रेरित शिक्षण है उनमें परिपूर्णता नहीं हो सकता है. प्राचीन गुरुकुल में इसके बारे में, अर्थात व्यक्तित्व के बारे में भी हम फोकस करते थे और ज्ञान के बारे में भी फोकस करते थे. ऐसा हमारा चिंतन है. इसका क्रियान्वय करने के लिए 1994 से मैत्रेयी गुरुकुल का शुभारंभ हुआ. अर्थात
So the thing is that there was an experienced lacunae in the existing mode of education, which was not addressing the individual holistically, and therefore these Gurukulams came up to try and provide a more holistic education, which is also looking at the development of the individual. And the first Gurukulam that came up in 19 kada Asit Baba?
1994.
The girls Gurukulam.
96 में प्रबोधिनी गुरुकुल का शुभारंभ हुआ और 97 में वेद विज्ञान गुरुकुल का शुभारंभ हुआ. वेद विज्ञान गुरुकुल तो हायर एजुकेशन के लिए है और प्रबोधिनी मैत्रेयी गुरुकुल तो प्राइमरी एजुकेशन के लिए है. गुरुकुल में ज्यादा से हम कहते हैं
primary, the first 2 Gurukulams, the Maitreyi for the girls, and there are about 100 girls, na? Mahabala?
140
girls, 100 plus boys in either of them is for primary, and the Veda Vijnana Gurukulam is for the secondary higher education.
Higher education. हम गुरुकुल में पंचमुख शिक्षण कहते हैं। जैसा हमने पहले बताया, व्यक्तित्व, परिपूर्ण व्यक्तित्व होने के लिए पंचमुख कहते हैं। वेद, विज्ञान, कृषि, योग और कला कौशल, ऐसा हम पंचमुख शिक्षण कहते हैं। उधर वेद कहेंगे तो उनमें प्राचीन ज्ञान धारा जो होती है, हम कहते हैं चतुर्वेदाः पुराणानि सर्वोपनिषदस्तथा रामायणं भारतञ्च गीताः सद्दर्शनानि च जैनागमाः त्रिपिटकाः गुरुग्रन्थः सतां गिरः एष ज्ञाननिधि श्रेष्ठः। ऐसे हम, ये तो वेद में अंतर्गत होता है। अनुराधा भवती एतत् सर्वं श्लोकं वदेदिति नास्ति अनुवादकाले। और विज्ञान में तो
अनुवादं करणीयं मया। So he was just saying these 5 faceted to create a holistic person. So the first facet is Veda, Vijnana. So Veda comprises of a lot of the ancient literature that is there. So okay, Mahabala, would you prefer that he speak in Sanskrit? I can say it then for everybody to be equal. So let him speak in Sanskrit and I will translate.
सम्यक्।
भवान् संस्कृते एव वदतु, अहं अनुवादं करिष्यामि।
आं तथैव करोमि। अस्तु अस्तु, शक्यते तथैव कुर्मः।
पञ्चमुखी
अनन्तरं पंचमुखानि विज्ञान, कृषिः, योगः, कौशलम्।
Yoga, we all know, and Kausalam is developing some skill and talent, music, etc.
एवं पंचमुख शिक्षणम् इति वयं वदामः। पंचमं ज्ञातं, विज्ञानम् इति शास्त्रं तत्र विशेषेण परिगण्यते, व्याकरणादिशास्त्रम्। अत्र छात्राः विविध राज्येभ्यः आगताः, 11 आगताः छात्राः सम्प्रति अध्ययनं कुर्वन्तः सन्ति।
So there are
दशमकक्षां
So there are students from
वदतु
11 places, 11 different regions, and so they really, it's an integrated all India program. And Anantaram vadatu.
अस्माकं दशमकक्षां समाप्य स्नातकोत्तरस्तरपर्यन्तं छात्राः अत्र अध्ययनं कुर्वन्ति।
After the 10th till the graduation they study.
अस्माकं कर्नाटक संस्कृत विश्वविद्यालयतः मान्यतापि वर्तते। कॉलेज इति मान्यता, रेकग्निशन अस्ति। एवं विशेषेण अत्रत्य दिनचर्या प्रातः 4:30 प्रभृति 10 पर्यन्तं विविध क्रियाकलापाः भवन्ति। केवलम् अध्ययनम् अध्यापनं न, ते श्रमसेवां कुर्वन्ति, योगाभ्यासं कुर्वन्ति, अन्य भूसेवा, गोसेवा, क्रीडा इत्यादिषु अपि भागं गृह्णन्ति। एतत् सर्वं कुर्वन्तः एव ते छात्राः पठन्ति।
So the curriculum starts from 4 o'clock in the morning and goes on till 10 o'clock at night. And they are engaged in various kinds of activities beyond study and teaching, where they are also looking after the cows, they're doing the yogasana, they're helping in the kitchen, they're really engaging in cleaning the place. In fact, if you are in Bangalore, you must visit the Gurukulam. The atmosphere is fantastic there. And the cows, they've got some gorgeous cows. Vadatu. Maya anuvada uttaramapि
सम्यक्। अस्तु अस्तु, भवती अपि जानाति अतः वक्तुं शक्नोति, वस्तुतः स्वयमेव वक्तुं शक्नोति। विशेषेण परीक्षाक्रमः अपि वर्तते। पारंपरिक परीक्षाक्रमः अर्थात् एकं ग्रन्थं समग्रं पठन्ति छात्राः, उत्तरं विद्वांसः आगत्य पारम्परिकपद्धत्या साम्प्रदायिकपद्धत्या परीक्षां कुर्वन्ति। तत्र शलाकापरीक्षा अस्ति, घटिकास्थानपरीक्षा इत्युच्यते। अत्यन्तकठिनपरीक्षा ज्ञानावलोकनम् इति वयं वदामः। अर्थात् तैः कियत् गृहीतं, कुत्र सन्देहः वर्तते, कथं ते अग्रे पठेयुः इत्यादि दृष्ट्या तत् महते उपकाराय भवति। अयमपि एकः।
Astu. So what he was just saying there is that the evaluation method is also quite unique, because the emphasis is on seeing how much they have actually learnt of the Shastra. So they have the student takes up one Shastram and the expert comes in, they have something called the Shalaka Pariksha, where they'll put the stick anywhere in the book and ask the student to talk about it and explain it. So they have to be extremely thorough with the contents of the text that they are examining.
विशेषः गुरुकुलस्य छात्रैः सह आचार्याः अपि वसन्ति। गुरुकुलवासः अर्थात् गुरुः यत्र वसति तत्रैव छात्राः निवसन्ति। अर्थात् गुरोः इष्टावरेव निवसन्ति।
Can you hear the sound? I'm not being able to hear it clearly.
No, can't.
Mahabala,
Oh.
video na shruyate spashtam. Spashtam na shruyate. Anyway, he was just trying to say that the specialization, the speciality also is the fact that the students and teachers study together. So the teachers are also learning and the teachers are also, and it is the Gurukula, the living together, which is the beauty of this place as well.
एतावत् पर्यन्तं 130 छात्राः इतः अध्ययनं समाप्य विविधक्षेत्रेषु कार्यं कुर्वन्तः सन्ति। मास्टर् डिग्री पर्यन्तम् अध्ययनं समाप्य विशेषेण गुरुकुले कार्यं कुर्वन्ति, कृषिकार्यं कुर्वन्ति, योगक्षेत्रे कार्यं कुर्वन्ति। विदेशेषु अपि विभिन्नस्थानेषु ते छात्राः गुरुकुलस्य छात्रचराः कार्यं कुर्वन्तः सन्ति विभिन्नस्तरेषु भूत्वा।
Yeah, so they are well established in different places. About 130 students so far have completed, and they're well established in different places.
एतत् सर्वं भारतीय प्राचीन पद्धत्याम् एकं वाक्यं उक्त्वा समापयामि। एतत् सर्वं भारतीय प्राचीन पद्धत्या अर्थात् प्राचीन भारते आहारस्य, औषधस्य, विद्यायाश्च विक्रयणं न भवति स्म। तेनैव क्रमेण गुरुकुले भोजनं, वासः, विद्या, प्राथमिकचिकित्सा इत्येतत् सर्वं निःशुल्कतया निरूह्यते। अयमपि गुरुकुलस्य विशेषः।
So he's saying that based on certain principles of ancient India, where 3 things were not to be sold, there was ahara, food, medicine, and education were not to be sold there. So it follows that same tradition, and all of these are free in the institute for the children, for the Gurukula.
अतः ये अस्माकं वेबसाइट मध्येपि द्रष्टुमर्हन्ति vvgurukulam.org तत्रापि गुरुकुलस्य विशेषेण परिचयः प्राप्यते। पुनश्च यदा बेंगळूरु आगच्छन्ति कृपया गुरुकुलम् आगच्छन्तु, छात्रैः सह संवादं कुर्वन्तु। विशेषेण अनुराधा भगिनी अपि गुरुकुले बहूनि दिनानि भूत्वा अध्ययनमपि कृतवती। अस्माभिः सह सर्वदा गुरुकुलीय कार्यकलापेषु प्रोत्साहिका भवति। भवन्तः सर्वेपि भवत्यः च गुरुकुलम् आगच्छन्तु। यथा संस्कृतम् इदानीं पठन्तः सन्ति तद्वत् सर्वेपि अग्रे अनुवर्तयन्तु। या गीर्वाणभारती।
So very beautifully. Yeah. So he just said that all since we're all studying Sanskrit, so there is a warm invitation to experience the life of the Gurukulam there. And he said that I had also, in fact, when I was doing my PhD, the Acharya. So one thing that because the Pradhanacharya, Dr. Ramchandra Bhatt was the founder of the Gurukulam, extremely open. One is, I'm just adding to what he said. One is that in terms of, there is sometimes this notion that education is, that this kind of education, Shastric education, is limited to the Brahmanical class. But at the Gurukulam, all the students, irrespective of their social background, are initiated into the Gayatri Mantra. And you have people from every category who are freely given this education. So, and also the fact that although I was a woman and it's primarily a boys' Gurukulam, the senior boys' Gurukulam, but the Acharya was more than welcoming to me, and I went and stayed there and I studied there for a while. They even made special provisions so that I could go and study there. So extremely open in their acceptance of genuine seekers of knowledge, that sense. So if I'm ever in Bangalore, it would be wonderful to organize a trip whenever Corona permits it to for those there to come and visit. But it's a place that you must visit, spend at least half a day to just soak in the ambience. So just my own experience was when I was studying there. It was one place where in the free time, the children were discussing about the Brahman, Brahman etadasi tatra, because they're discussing their Shastric matters. So they're talking about the Brahman and what are the qualities of the Brahman and why this Shastra said it this way and that Shastra said it that way. So quite amusing to actually see that it becomes part of the atmosphere itself. So that was very nice. And they have a lovely Dakshinamurti temple of Pitatras. They always look after it. They do all the puja. So when you have your meal there, for example, Mahabalakati Chhatraha Santi Idanim Gurukule Vartamana na Varna tu Vartamana Ahatya Kati Chhatraha Tatra Pathanti Sadya
Idanim Saptati 70 Chhatraha Asmin Varshe.
70 boys, and when you go there to have a meal, then you have the whole lot of them doing the chanting before the meal starts. And it's like after that you don't feel like eating too much because it's so nourishing. The sounds of their chanting are so nourishing. And then they have this parampara of one person will start a shloka, then another person will start a shloka. So it's Kimbo?
Shloke Antyakshari. Shlokantyakshari.
Shlokantyakshari. So we have, for example, one of their products. In fact, Mahabalacharya's classmate, Sri Ramana, extremely orthodox in his practices. Although he belongs to a doctor family, but he chose that particular lifestyle because he wanted to be a practicing this Agnihotri. Very strict in his practices. But on the other side, he's a computer wizard. He has got the highest prize for the computer geniuses that they get. So great combinations. Na Mahabala tari bhavataha tat gurukulartham dhanam datum achhati bhavan kripaya सूचनाः ददातु
details यदि ये केपि गुरुकुलं प्रति साहाय्यं कर्तुं इच्छन्ति ते अहम् अकाउंट डिटेल्स प्रेषयामि मनीषा फाउंडेशन गुरुकुल निधि इति अकाउंट नाम वर्तते तस्य डिटेल्स सर्वम् अहम् अनुराधायै प्रेषयामि ये केपि इच्छन्ति चेत् तत्र प्राप्य प्रेषयितुमर्हन्ति.
So he'll give the details. Saha sarvaha suchanaha dasyati. अस्तु ते भवतः किञ्चित् तत्र समीचीनः नास्ति नाम सर्वं पूर्णरूपेण शक्नुमः चिन्ता नास्ति तेषां महान् आनन्दः अवगत्य च शान्ति उत्तमम्। इतोपि संस्कृतसम्भाषणम् आवश्यकम् अस्ति। आम्।
अस्तु
अस्तु तर्हि
नमो नमः। सर्वेभ्यः प्रणामाः।
धन्यवादः हरे।
धन्यवादः।
So we will just, and so his children, for example, they are growing up with quite a lot of Sanskrit. Abhirama Sanskritam vadati na?
संस्कृतेन भाषन्ते।
Kannada matrabhasha, किन्तु संस्कृतम् अपि भाषा. Vasudha Bhagini came to the Gurukulam, she learned Sanskritam. Now the little ones, two little ones, they're also Sanskritam. Astu, so we'll close.
अस्तु शुभं शुभं शुभम्।
ओम ए लोकाः समस्ता सुखिनो भवन्तु इति उक्त्वा गच्छ अनन्तरम्।
एवम् अहं भवामि।
So let's just say Om Lokaha Samasta. Om Lokaha Samasta Sukhino Bhavantu Lokaha Samasta Sukhino Bhavantu Lokaha Samasta Sukhino Bhavantu. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti.